Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 231, The Next Gen. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Minato had returned with Kushina to the property, where she was being kept behind the barrier. Not even his special Umbu guards noticed the shift due to Minato's jutsu, as the clone switched places seamlessly with the originals, taking Minato and Kushina's previous positions before vanishing in smoke, no longer needed. I'm going. Minato said at last. It was already afternoon, and Minato wanted to visit the village before nightfall. Minato. Kushina looked at him with concerned eyes as she murmured his name. Minato touched her shoulder, gently squeezing it. We'll make this work, Kushina, he confidently reassured her. After all, they'd had a 10-minute conversation earlier, right after he sealed all traces of the Ninetales chakra lingering in the air into a scroll, ensuring no sensor from the village could detect it. I know that, Minato. I trust you more than anyone else, but that doesn't make me worry any less, she whispered. Kushina had received plenty of significant information, the destruction of her clan and Minato's request that she control the Ninetales within her. Even with his help, Minato would still have to leave the village and possibly become a traitor. Minato kept a gentle smile, indicating that everything would be fine, urging her not to worry too much. Nevertheless, just as he was about to leave, he felt Kushina suddenly grabbing him, as if afraid he might disappear forever. Promise me everything will be alright, she spoke, hugging him tightly. He sighed a little, softly smiling as he returned the embrace of the woman he loved. Yes, he replied, feeling her gently kiss him. After that, they separated, and Minato began walking away, passing through the barrier while Kushina kept watching him from the doorway. We'll be back here tonight, Minato said. After all, it was normal for them to come and dine with Kushina, who could no longer leave this place due to the village's orders. They regularly visited her. Passing the ninjas secretly guarding Kushina, he found Nawaki standing with his single hand in his pocket, the other sleeve of his shirt swaying gently in the breeze. He leaned against the main house, as if waiting for someone. You're here, he said. Yes. How are things? Minato asked. A bit lonely, Nawaki replied. Minato understood the sentiment. After all, Suna spent most of the day at the hospital, while Suna's sister and mother, Tsunade, were outside the village. That loneliness was understandable for Nawaki, being one of the last Senju alive. Some had survived until the end of the war, but were eventually killed in desperate attacks from the cloud in the north. You still haven't found a girlfriend, man? Minato teased lightly. You say that like it's easy, Nawaki mumbled. I just hope you're not reading my sensei's books, Minato added, knowing that clearly wasn't the best resource for understanding women. Of course not. Nawaki responded, slightly embarrassed, clearly lying. Anyway, meet me tomorrow at Training Ground 7 if you're free. We need to talk, Minato said, and Nawaki nodded, not knowing exactly what Minato wanted now. Bring Due too, he added as a final note. Due and Nawaki had ended up forming a team for missions. Since Due was already training and progressing toward opening the gates, it made sense to keep them together, especially after Nawaki had lost his team at the end of the war. Minato wasn't sure exactly what to do now but wanted to spend some time walking that afternoon. He had eaten something earlier with the girls before visiting Kushina and then had Kushina's cake afterward, so hunger wasn't an issue. He just continued walking out of the clan grounds. He paused for a moment, trying to sense where his girls were within the village. Using his sensory chakra and observation haki, he easily located all of them at the village center, buying a few things. Mostly ingredients, so Minato could cook something that night, obviously wishing to eat his food. He left that side and kept walking through the streets like an ordinary villager, observing the shops and the people, seeing how they interacted. A glint in his eyes reflected some of the questions he'd asked himself after leaving the mission. What was the village's purpose? What did it mean to be a shinobi? After all, the Will of Fire was about protecting Konoha, its ninjas, and their families. Giving your life for the village. But more than that, it was about giving your life for the very idea that built Konoha, for the bonds Konoha's shinobi shared and for future generations, although it seemed a bit contradictory coming from Sarutobi, given he was sacrificing the Uzumaki. Hey, isn't that Minato Namikaze? Some people whispered upon seeing him walk down the street. Minato hadn't received this much attention in over a year. After being hailed as a war hero, he had worked exclusively as an ANBU squad member. It was somewhat surprising that people would recognize him immediately, since it was rare to see him around the village, and he hadn't performed any grand deeds as Minato Namikaze recently. But he didn't pay much attention to those people, continuing to hammer away at his internal questions. Without realizing it, as he was slightly distracted, he soon noticed he'd stopped in front of a specific place. I can't even remember the last time I looked at this place, Minato murmured, a bit surprised upon seeing it, although nostalgia quickly overtook him. It really had been years since he'd looked at the Ninja Academy entrance. After graduation, he'd never had a reason to come back. While gazing at the entrance, his eyes shifted further back, landing on an old swing, remembering that Naruto might sit there one day in the future. Nevertheless, he didn't go towards the swing. After all, he was too old for something like that, but he still decided to stay there. He sat down on a bench, enjoying the rare feeling of being alone, something he seldom experienced since he was always with his girls. He spent a few minutes just breathing in the air of Konoha, until he sensed people approaching. Hurry up, Obito. We have to deliver this to Sensei before class ends. Minato heard the girl calling out to the boy who wore some sort of sporty goggles. I know. It's just that I had to help an old lady cross the street, Rin. But I'm coming now, he shouted, running towards the girl after being late and causing her to wait after she'd already waited for him. Minato didn't know the context of their hurry to deliver something to their teacher, nor why they were outside the academy, but he couldn't judge. After all, classes had different schedules. Just like during his own academy days, there had been days he spent entirely in class, while others were only half days. It could be a test or an assignment their teacher requested. But that didn't matter right now. Minato was seeing Rin and Obito for the first time, who were supposed to be in Kakashi's original class, who, unsurprisingly, had already graduated and was acting far beyond a ninja of his young age, having become a chunin at age 8. Minato remained there, observing them with interest as they ran by, initially not noticing him due to their hurry. They'll graduate in a few years, will I be their teacher? Minato couldn't help but wonder, watching them pass by. He'd seen them around the village a few times, but it was the first time seeing them up close. Minato was ready to become their teacher, and he'd never allow their fates to become as tragic as they'd ended up. Like Kakashi finally realizing, at the last moment, that his teammates were more than mere tools for the village and its missions, Rin dying, or even Obito being corrupted by Madara Uchiha. Minato would avoid that fate, but certainly, if that happened to the Uchiha boy, if Obito turned toward evil, he'd handle things differently from Naruto. After all, Minato didn't believe someone could simply return to the right path after just a conversation. Obito had committed crimes that were unforgivable. Minato quickly set those thoughts aside, realizing he was contemplating the fate of a child whom he could still protect and guide toward the right path. At the same moment, footsteps stopped in front of him, and a pair of feet turned toward him. Obito? Rin spoke up, noticing her teammate had stopped, looking at the man who seemed around 10 years older than them, sitting there. Minato also looked at Obito with a calm gaze, analyzing the young Uchiha standing before him. You? He murmured, recognizing Minato's face from somewhere, but unable to pinpoint exactly from where. Minato couldn't help but smile slightly, watching Obito staring and trying to remember his face. Can I help you, young man? Minato finally spoke. Do you know him? Rin stepped closer to Obito, also looking at Minato. He doesn't seem unfamiliar. I've seen him somewhere. I just can't remember exactly where. Didn't I help you once? Obito asked. Minato wore a regular hoodie and pants, dressed as a civilian. Even on days off, off-duty ninjas usually wore their uniforms, causing Obito's confusion at seeing Minato without his headband. "Obito, we have to go," Rin reminded him urgently, causing Obito to nod and snap out of it. "Right. Let's go." I remember," the boy interrupted himself, shouting and pointing at Minato. Minato raised an eyebrow, while the girl seemed increasingly urgent about returning to the academy. "My grandma told me about you." Obito pointed directly at Minato. "She even showed us a drawn picture and said we Uchiha should stay away from you because you're dangerous." Minato raised his eyebrow even higher, surprised by the sudden accusation, while Rin seemed shocked at Obito's bluntness toward an apparently random stranger. Minato clearly understood that the Uchihas weren't at all pleased with him over the past year, especially after what he'd done to the clan elder in easily defeating every clan member who'd confronted him. Even so, he hadn't expected they would start showing his image to the younger generation and warning them about the hostility they held toward him. "I can't say I'm on the best terms with your clan. After all, I did beat up some Uchiha members, but I was defending my future wife, and I don't regret doing it," Minato replied calmly. Obito seemed startled by Minato's answer. All he'd heard from his grandma was that he should stay as far away as possible from this man, as Minato was dangerous and nobody in the clan could do anything against him. Obito opened his mouth to reply again, but before he could say anything else, a Chunin appeared next to them, looking seriously at the two youngsters. "What are you two doing out here? You're the only ones who haven't entered the classroom yet. If you're not inside within the next 30 seconds, I'll give both of you a 0, he complained immediately, making Rin and Obito frown. "And you're even bothering others," he added, immediately recognizing Minato. "It's my fault, sensei." "Don't be so harsh on them," Minato spoke up to ease the situation for the two youngsters, noticing their nervousness. "All right, I'll forgive you this time, but you'd better be careful." "Go," the teacher said, while Rin and Obito quickly nodded and ran inside, giving Minato one last glance. "That boy is too impulsive, and the girl always tries to help him," the teacher commented afterward, watching them enter. "That's common for them, sir," Minato politely replied since he didn't know this teacher. "Kim," the teacher calmly responded. "My name is Kim. Minato Namikaze, right? Anyway, I have to go now. It's a bit surprising to meet you here. I was just thinking about a few things. Couldn't help remembering my own days here. I studied at this academy," Minato commented thoughtfully. "I see. You might not know this, but when you entered the academy in the elite class, I was in my second to last year," Kim revealed, smiling slightly. "I remember very clearly how you began to stand out at the end of your first year and soared through the second, becoming the greatest genius of that generation," he remarked, completing his thought shortly afterward, "and later, the hero." Minato raised an eyebrow slightly at the comment. "Just serving the village to the best of my abilities," Minato replied calmly and humbly. The teacher nodded. "I hope you'll become an example for these youngsters as well," he said before leaving Minato standing alone there. Minato stayed a bit longer, leaving shortly afterward as he continued walking. In the classroom, the teacher was already waiting as the two students entered. "Sensei, who was that?" Obito immediately asked after handing in the delayed papers to the teacher. "He's Minato Namikaze, the village hero who was officially recognized a year ago," the teacher explained to the class, causing Obito's eyes to widen in surprise. "Right. Now I remember." Rin exclaimed as well, recalling Minato's appearance from when the Hokage had publicly honored him in the village along with other heroes. She had been with her friends celebrating in the village at that time. "Really a hero," Obito murmured. He didn't clearly remember Minato's name, only the drawing his grandmother had shown him. "Not just that," the teacher continued. "He also became the genius of his era when he was at the academy, joining a program in which the village invested a lot of resources, but in the end managed to produce powerful shinobi," he explained to all the students. "Like Kakashi." Obito murmured again, feeling a bit of anger as he mentioned the name of the prodigy who always stood out from his class, considered the example from the previous graduating group. having left all of them behind, envy was clear in his eyes as he thought about his rival. Mr. Minato is the best. I know him, and we even trained together with my dad. Mike Guy, who was also in the class, immediately shouted upon overhearing the conversation. Anyway, let's move on. I'll announce the grades for your assignments after correcting these last two, the teacher announced as class was coming to an end. Chapter 232, The Dark Side of Konoha. Third Person POV. Konoha, Year 42. I want some more. Databane. Kushina shouted, raising her plate, while Minato was finishing cooking a homemade barbecue sauce for the meat he had prepared on the grill, moving toward the table. He poured the sauce over Kushina's meat and then placed the rest so the other girls could help themselves whenever they wanted. He sat down at the table shortly after to eat. In the end, everyone gathered as planned, at Kushina's house. While Minato had prepared the food, as they had agreed, they managed to get organized after Makoto, Hanabi, and Suna arrived with the ingredients they had bought and went to Kushina's house. Delicious as always. I always have to wait a few weeks to taste this food, Suna said cheerfully, as she grabbed a bit more. Meanwhile, the others, Hanabi and Makoto, ate calmly, enjoying the food. They also had a certain difficulty eating the meals made by Minato even during missions. After all, they barely had time for it, especially as squad leaders. After spending a good part of the night at Kushina's house, she asked to be visited the next day. Suna returned to her home while saying goodbye to them. Can we walk? I wanted to see the village, Makoto asked suddenly, and Minato nodded, going with Hanabi out of the Senju clan. They went to the Hyuga clan's residence, and Hanabi returned to the clan. Makoto ended up continuing with Minato, heading toward his apartment. They walked together for a while through the village, watching the lives of other people out that night, while Makoto looked at Minato and raised an eyebrow. You seem better than you were before, she murmured, and knew it wasn't just because he had seen Kushina. He smiled. Let's say I met some special people today, Minato said, but didn't give many details. She only raised an eyebrow but didn't insist. As they walked through the village, everything followed its usual rhythm. People selling in their shops, civilians scattered through the streets with their families, undercover ninjas walking around or some on missions running across the rooftops, and of course, the village's internal security, the Uchiha. It didn't take long for them to notice some Uchiha observing them. When Makoto noticed the stares, she turned to Minato with a slightly suspicious expression. Something like that had become quite normal after what had happened. Minato was rarely seen around the village lately, and the Uchiha kept a steady gaze on the two every time they saw them. Although they didn't do anything, they seemed quite frustrated. Either way, they continued on to Minato's apartment and spent the night there. The next day, Minato had to leave the girls behind once again, as he headed to his shops. He went to check the inventory and talk to his employees. Civilians who assisted customers looking for all kinds of items he kept trading, which were ninja equipment. Lord Minato. It's amazing to see you, said one of his employees, seeing him entering and walking past the morning customers. Good morning. Minato just nodded and went to the back of the store, where the books with the inventory data were kept. He took them and began to carefully analyze the records. There was all the data he needed about the activities and results of his stores. He now needed to be ready for what he was about to do. That's why he had to carefully manage all the possible resources over the next few months. Usually, he would seek resources from suppliers of the items he sold. Many of them blacksmiths from the village itself were spread throughout the Land of Fire who brought them to him. As for the explosive tags, he produced them himself, easily being the top seller of these items in Konoha. He made deals directly with the ninjas who sought them or through a contract with the Hokage himself, supplying the tags to be distributed for missions to the ninjas. Minato was extremely wealthy because of this, being the only one who could create hundreds of clones to work on crafting explosive tags for his shops. As a master in Fuinjutsu and having the ease of creating so many clones despite not being an Uzumaki or a Senju, he even ended up harming the Uzumaki's business, who previously supplied this type of item to the village in other regions, although they still sold other kinds of seals. Minato now needed to prepare. He couldn't decrease the resource stockpiles too much, as that would raise suspicion about what he was about to do. But he needed to find a way to deceive the village. However, the most important thing now was the money. He needed to keep everything to himself, not knowing exactly what could happen in the coming months. He quickly started writing some orders in the books. After that, he left the store and went for another walk through Konoha. He didn't know exactly why, since he had done that the day before, but some comments from customers left him unsettled, so he decided to stroll through the village. It didn't take long to confirm his suspicions. As he saw more and more people, he could hear them whispering in the streets. "So, did you hear? They say the village will suffer a great loss because of this. And to think he would do that. What do you think the Hokage will do? He has to pay. Yeah. He must pay for this. He brings shame to the village. He shouldn't even be a ninja anymore. We have to complain to the Hokage. He's the scum of the village." People kept saying that kind of thing. The disgust for Konoha began to grow inside Minato, as he kept hearing it. Ungrateful people. One moment, they call you a hero, the next they want your head. He muttered, lowering his head as he kept walking. It was obvious what they were talking about when Minato helped Tsukumo and his team, whom he found returning from their mission to Konoha after Tsukumo had failed. That was the mission that would condemn him, to the point where the great hero would take his own life after hearing the entire village criticize him. It was frustrating. But, at the same time, suspicious. Tsukumo's team had returned yesterday, and suddenly, the entire village was already talking about it. Clearly, they were destroying his reputation at record speed. Danzu. Minato muttered, knowing very well how Danzu's influence had grown in the past year. Besides that, Minato had some suspicions very close to him. Within his own team for a few months now, since his team had been linked ever since Alpha's leadership, and some members seemed to have changed their behavior in recent months. He would have to check their tongues for the seal, but hadn't had the opportunity yet. Either way, Minato headed to Training Field 7 in the afternoon, after reviewing all his shops. He was going to meet Nawaki, just as he had said the day before. "Hey, Minato." That was when he heard the voice of Chusa Akimichi approaching, alongside Yamanaka and Shikaku. Minato looked at them and smiled, as they chatted briefly. "You've been pretty famous lately. The Ino Shikacho team never fails a mission," Minato commented, his mood lifting a little upon seeing his friends. They weren't part of any special squad like him, but they had been completing several missions as regular teams. Minato ran into them now and then, although it had been rare over the past year. He knew they were standing out a lot in the village. Shikaku, in fact, had taken over as team leader after their former sensei left the team. There wasn't even a need to assign another jounin, it was one of the few teams with only 3 members, but that didn't stop them from completing numerous missions with a success rate close to 100%. After saying goodbye to his friends, Minato continued on until he found Nawaki, as expected. "Minato." Nawaki greeted, as the blonde returned the greeting. "How are you?" "Ah, I'm fine. Today's the only day you'll be able to talk to me. I received a summons from the Hokage today, and tomorrow I'll have to go on a mission with Master Due," he replied. "I see. I don't need much time, just a few minutes," Minato said. With the signal only the two of them knew, Nawaki understood. Minato just checked to make sure no one was spying before continuing. "The time has come for us to start acting, Nawaki," Minato said in a serious tone. Immediately, Nawaki narrowed his eyes. "You think there's no more time?" he asked in a serious tone. "No. The village has started turning a blind eye to everything that happened with the Uzumaki clan. My last mission proved it. The villages are gathering information about the Uzumakis. And, if everything is right, in 6 months the attack will begin." "So, you really intend to?" Nawaki murmured cautiously. "Yes. I'll try to overturn the village's leadership. But it won't be an easy task. That's why I want to contact your sister the next time you see her.
I'd like you to send a scroll in her name, so it doesn't seem suspicious.
It's very likely they'll change my team, and it would seem strange for me to seek Tsunade on my own, Minato explained.
I understand. So it'll be hard for you to act. But you can count on me.
I'll make them pay for what they did to me, Nawaki said with a tone of hatred.
Yes. It's time to start the reconstruction of your arm.
But still, I want you to become the leader of the clan. If things really get ugly, I'll have to take Kushina with me.
I won't leave her in the village.
If the third war breaks out, they'll use her, knowing she's connected to me and fearing she might use that against the village.
So it's very possible they'll get rid of her at the first opportunity. Minato said with a sigh. Makoto and Hanabi will go with me too. Now, Suna. Minato paused, uncertain.
He still didn't know if it would be better to take Tsuna out of the village even if that made her a traitor, or leave her where she might be safe.
I think you should take her.
They'll probably use her against you, or against us if things go wrong.
Nawaki said. All right. Either way, let's begin the plan. Remember, don't take too many risks, because you'll be safer here. Try to remain neutral.
If we can gather all the evidence we intend to in the coming months, we'll be able to corner the village leadership.
But, if it doesn't work, I'll have to act on my own.
And maybe, only a third war can reverse this.
Minato took a deep breath.
Anyway, I need to go somewhere else now.
Take care, Nawaki.
Minato finished, in a firm but calm tone, as they spoke in an isolated place, where no one could hear.
Nawaki simply nodded his head and watched Minato vanish in front of him.
His gaze then turned to the faces carved into the Hokage rock in the distance. He stared especially at Hashirama's, with a serious expression.
Is this what you expected from your village, grandfather?
Nawaki murmured, without a trace of humor. After that, he headed back to the clan. He needed to prepare as well.
Chapter 233 Reuniting with Gyurin and Plans. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42.
Minato reappeared, stomping his feet against the surface of the sand with force on that beach, as the sea breeze quickly rushed into his nostrils. His next stop after leaving Nawaki was none other than his secret place, used since many years ago. As he looked curiously at the sea to the south, he remembered that this was not only the place where he trained and developed the Raisin Shuriken, along with the powers of the light fruit, but also where he met a strange fish, his friend of years whom he had found by chance on this very beach. And Minato was there precisely because of him. After all, contact between the two had resumed in the last year after almost 2 years of barely speaking due to the war and Gyurin undergoing a journey exploring the sea to become stronger.
Minato! Unsurprisingly, an explosion burst from the sea.
The fish soared out of the water, rushing toward the beach at an astonishing speed. He could simply accelerate in the air with his tail, beating it rapidly and with such impressive force that it generated an air explosion, before returning to the water. Then, he jumped again, crossing dozens of meters at high speed.
Gyurin! It's good to see you. Minato smiled, brightened.
The blue fish, with horns and a strangely articulated speech, belonged to the fish clan.
Besides reasoning like any intelligent animal, they had special abilities. I felt your presence the moment you appeared on the beach. I'm easily a powerful sensor, as you call it. Gyurin replied. He had an incredible sensory ability.
It wasn't based on chakra, but on the purest spiritual presence, something similar to observation haki, which Minato possessed, but at the same time, it wasn't the same ability, despite being similar.
Minato approached, smiling even more upon seeing his old friend.
His mood improved as he walked on the water, moving toward the fish who now waited, still, in the shallowest part of the beach.
Gyurin was visibly much larger than before, with half of his body out of the water. It's good that you arrived.
I was in my clan over the past month, and the trial of the waterfall will happen soon.
Gyurin said, his voice deep.
Minato had come there before but hadn't found him this month. Now the fish explained why, while Minato listened attentively.
That's good. Are you ready for it? Minato asked. Obviously, Minato. I'm strong enough for it. Gurren responded, waving his right fin. Minato still didn't exactly know what happened to Gurren or the other members of his clan after the so-called trial of the waterfall. Gurren only explained that everyone, at some point, had to face it. Those who failed would remain in the clan, in the sea, for the rest of their lives. On the other hand, those who managed to reach the top of the waterfall somehow disappeared. No one heard from them again. However, everyone knew they had achieved what they desired. Minato didn't even know if they died or transcended to somewhere else. He couldn't understand anything about this clan. But, for some reason, Gurren always said that everyone in his clan was born with this immense will in their hearts, to reach the top of the waterfall. There, they would evolve. Well, seeing that, you'll need to be even more prepared. Shall we train a bit? Minato asked. Gurren nodded in agreement. They spent the late afternoon training together. Minato helped him. Even with the somewhat strange friendship, after all, it was a talking fish, he considered him one of his most trustworthy companions. Quickly, the battle began, making the waves of the water stir, as the fish charged against Minato. He leapt as well, activating armament haki in his fist, which advanced rapidly forward. The fish responded with his tail, striking forcefully against Minato's fist. Immediately, a sonic explosion occurred between the two, and the sea seemed to recede from that point. Minato was always stunned by the strength Gurren had achieved by growing so much in recent years. He was capable of shattering rocks and even producing cutting winds with his movements. Minato had no idea that the Horned Fish clan possessed such capabilities. Besides the growth, the blue scales were harder than steel, creating a natural armor around the fish. Gurren didn't have that before, and Minato had never seen any other member of his clan, so witnessing that evolution in the fish was overwhelming. Even though he didn't need to use the full power of his haki, Gurren had become so strong that just fighting with Minato's regular body wasn't enough to match the fish's current strength. That's why he coated his fist with armament haki to withstand the impacts. Gurren, in a strong tone, explained more about the strength of his clan. He himself could leap from the water and soar more than 100 meters in the air. It was said that even the most powerful members of his clan, those who didn't pass the waterfall, could fly up to 200 meters in a jump from the sea, with enough force to devastate an entire beach, with the intensity of an A-rank jutsu, using their tails or even spitting a water jutsu, from what Minato had heard. Great, let's raise the intensity of this. Minato said, using this as a way to further refine his armament haki while exchanging blows with the fish. Gurren could also use Jeppo, an ability Minato had recently taught him. Even without having a one-piece style body like the blonde, Gurren managed to master the technique, using the force of his tail's impact in the air. Due could also potentially master Jeppo too, according to Minato's expectations, but he would first need to fully master the seventh gate. Something he was still developing at the time. Either way, the two continued fighting for a few hours, until the sun began to set. I think it's time I head back to Konoha. It's already getting dark, Minato said. Gurren nodded, but then called out to him. Wait, Minato. I wanted to talk to you about something. Minato looked at him curiously. What is it? He asked. You think I'm strong, don't you? Gurren asked, looking at him with a strange expression. Minato was surprised by the question from the fish, but answered sincerely. Yes. You're very strong. I'd say you're at the level of an elite jounin. Minato had to admit. The speed at which Gurren struck the air with his tail, being able to fly, generate pressure and wind attacks, in addition to his brute strength, not to mention his special attack, another trait of his clan, using his horns that could emit electricity, made him truly formidable, able to create lightning jutsu. So, I was thinking. Gurren continued, seeming a bit embarrassed. You've told me before about the toads you can summon to fight alongside you. I'd like to do the same. When you need my help, I want you to summon me. And I'd also like to take you to the Fish Clan. Gurren finished, surprising Minato. You want to make a summoning contract? Are you sure about that? Wait, you want me to go to the fish clan too? Minato asked, somewhat incredulous, but curious. Guren just nodded. Of course. Didn't I say many years ago that I wanted you to take part in the trial I was going to do? So, you won't be able to reach the clan at the bottom of the sea. But a summoning could bring you there, he said. Minato scratched his chin, thoughtful about it. He didn't want to simply stop seeing his companion after he passed the waterfall trial, since there was a rumor that those who did so simply disappeared. Even so, this was Guren's will. His life mission was to go through that waterfall, and Minato didn't try to stop him, even with the information he had heard. All right. We can make a contract. Although I could use my teleportation seals, I believe a summoning would consume less chakra. But give me a few days, since I'll have to create it. Minato said, knowing he could make the summoning scroll thanks to his knowledge in Fuinjutsu. However, it was a complex process. It wasn't just signing a scroll with blood. He would have to develop the entire vocation and structure of the contract. That would take a few days, and he would even ask Kushina for help, but still, he agreed. That's great. Guren nodded enthusiastically. I'd like to see your home. And also, if you need me in a battle, I will help, Minato, he said with satisfaction. Minato simply nodded to that. Anyway, I'll be going now. Goodbye, Guren. Take care. I'll have a few more days off and I'll return here so we can continue training, he said. Guren nodded, and Minato vanished. Once again, he spent the night with the girls at Kushina's house. However, he seemed thoughtful. He interacted less than usual with his fiancées. But Minato hadn't been much of a talker in the past year. He preferred to let them talk among themselves while he thought about everything that was going on. With so many things happening at the same time, he was a bit worried about what to do next. The next day, Minato took Hanabi, Makoto, and Suna and left the village in secret, heading to the beach once again, something he had decided the night before. Why did you bring us here? That fish came back? Suna asked, curious. Guren is here. He'll probably appear once he senses our presence. But that's not exactly why I'm here. I want to talk about something serious that might sound like treason, and I didn't want anyone else to see. Minato began. And what would that be, then? Hanabi murmured, seeing Minato's serious expression. She already suspected something important was coming. The night before, he had clearly been deep in thought, but said nothing. They respected the silence. I want to talk about my possible departure from the village. And I'll probably be treated as a traitor. Minato began, leaving all of them wide-eyed. I can't force you into this, because I wouldn't want any of you to be called traitors. However, I'm obligated to take Kushina with me. Even so, I intend to defy the village if my plans to remove the Elder's power go wrong. And I wanted to know if you're willing to do the same. And bear the weight of being called traitors along with me. Minato said openly. They were surprised at first, but not completely. They already knew some things. That wasn't the first time this kind of conversation came up. Ever since Minato started planning how to prevent the destruction of the Uzumaki clan, after recognizing what had been done against them, he had shared some of his concerns with them. You're still asking, you idiot? Of course we'll be on your side. Suna said, crossing her arms. If you say that defending my great-grandmother's clan is important, obviously you don't even have to ask, I'll be with you. She added firmly. Yes. We'll leave the village. Minato, there's nothing keeping me here anymore. Hanabi said, while Minato gave a sincere smile. You think you can get rid of me that easily, Minato? Of course I'll be with you. Makoto said, with a sparkle in her eyes. Minato looked at them, feeling confident upon hearing the words of the women he loved, and smiled as he looked at the three. Very well, but it won't be easy, he said seriously. Anyway. Suna, you have a summoning contract with the slug Katsuyu, right? He asked, turning to her. Suna nodded, and Minato continued. You need to go to the Shikatsu forest. I'd like you to learn Sage Mode with Katsuyu over the next few months. I know it's risky, but it will be necessary. Minato explained, while she sighed, already anticipating the effort it would require. All right. I'll have to ask for a leave from the hospital, but I'll do it. She replied. Suna remembered that her mother hadn't been able to master the Sannin mode, but she herself could try. And now, more than ever, she would need it. I'll need something from you two as well. Minato said, turning to Makoto and Hanabi. But we'll talk later. For now. He stepped away from them a bit, bit his thumb until it bled slightly. Then, he began forming hand signs, preparing a summoning. In an instant, a large cloud of smoke covered the entire beach. The girls quickly stepped back, trying to shield themselves from the wind and impact of the summoning. The heavy sound of a colossal creature landing on the sand echoed throughout the area. Minato! Why did you summon me here? Where's the enemy? Gamabunta's deep voice boomed as he looked down, seeing Minato standing before him. There are no enemies now, Gamabunta. But I'm here to ask you something. Minato said firmly. HM? And what would that be? The giant toad asked, looking at him curiously. I want you to return to Mount Mayaboku and pass along my request to the Toad Elders. I'd like to go to the mountain, I want to make a request to them. Minato said, determined. That was the next part of his plan. Chapter 234, Minato and Tsunade's Plans. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Here are some requests from the Hokage, Lady Tsunade. Lumen, Minato's codename in the ANBU, said while in a town in the Land of Fire. So the old man needs me for a few more things. More than what he occasionally asks for. Tsunade muttered with dissatisfaction. Obviously, she was on leave, as she had Konoha's permission for it, but at the same time, the Hokage always ended up requesting her services in the medical field, as there was no one more capable in the village. The village constantly needed her knowledge and techniques, especially for use in the hospital. As long as she didn't deal with blood, she always helped, including research that was being carried out, even some secret ones, which was the case for dispatching an ANBU team to safely deliver the scroll to her hands. Minato did not doubt that shadowy research was being done behind the scenes in the village, perhaps nothing as radical as Orochimaru, but he was certain that Danzo had been asking for Tsunade's help many times through the Hokage. It had been a few days since the conversation Minato had with the girls in Gamabunta, and now he was returning to do missions, this time, not at the border as usual. He had come to this location to deliver the scroll. Oh, one more thing. This was added by Nawaki for me, it's a message from your brother. Lumen said, handing over the scroll as she received it with some suspicion. All right. I'll see what I can do with whatever that old man is asking for. And I'll read my brother's complaints asking me to stop drinking and gambling. She murmured, with a slightly ironic look, although her eyes gleamed with some suspicion as she stared at Minato, seeing his serious gaze through the slits of the fox mask with yellow stripes. After that, Minato said his goodbyes and left, leaving Tsunade alone. Sometime later, a 10-year-old child with a village forehead protector on her head approached Tsunade, opening the door of that room. Was someone here, Tsunade-sensei? It was Dan's niece. Tsunade had decided to take the girl as her apprentice while traveling through the Land of Fire. It's all right, it was nothing important. Now continue your training. Just try to control your chakra as you've been doing in the past weeks. No medical ninjutsu until you're good enough. Tsunade said to the girl, who seemed a bit down but nodded and left the room to go train. The girl had talent, and Tsunade could recognize that, but nothing compared to her daughter, who could already use medical ninjutsu at the age of 8 while still in the academy. Soon after, Tsunade, now alone, opened the scroll from the village. It was from members of the village's secret medical department. It reported research done with compatible cells. That made Tsunade frown deeply. That bastard. It's him. Just as we suspected. She murmured. If that bastard touches my grandfather's body, I swear. Tsunade knew very well what that meant. Obviously, she wasn't going to comply with the request. She would simply send a response saying she couldn't get any results when they asked for them. And then, she opened the letter sent by her brother. First, as always, her brother asked her to go easy on the drinking and gambling, while commenting that everything was fine and that Tsuna was working well at the hospital. However, in the following lines, a few details caught her attention. The words were in numbers, and with an angry look on her face, she went to her drawer and grabbed a specific book by Jiraiya, against her will. After all types of secret messages, did it have to use those books she hated so much? This was a secret writing she knew very well would be used, because the next word seemed more like Minato's idea than her own brother's. The same man who had just personally delivered that scroll a moment ago. Minato had met Tsunade at least a dozen times in the last half-year, delivering some scrolls to her at the village's request, which allowed them to talk. 6 months ago, he had a serious conversation with her, reporting what had happened in the war regarding her brother and showing the corpses he had preserved until that moment. They were members of the Root, ninjas from the village itself under Danzo's command who were sent to hunt down Nawaki. Obviously, the first thing Tsunade wanted was to run to the Hokage's office and demand Danzo's head, and even her former teachers, for allowing that. She was sure he knew everything. Especially after finding out from Minato as well what had really happened at the meeting and the price of peace, with the future of the Uzumaki clan being destroyed without Konoha helping them. But a serious conversation between her, Minato, and Nawaki calmed her down. After all, there were many things at stake. Besides, even if she acted alone at that moment, it might not be that effective. Minato tried to choose a new path. One that would plant a seed of doubt throughout the village with his leadership. But it would have to be in a way that cornered them. Minato had a plan that even they thought would be madness on his part, but it was the best possible strategy. Just thinking about it, Tsunade muttered, irritated. This all infuriates me. If it weren't for Minato, Nawaki would be dead, and he was lucky he activated the right gene seal at the last moment after his team was killed in front of him and his arm was removed. They wanted members of the Senju clan. They probably killed some of them during the war. And killing Nawaki would be the perfect scenario, and no one would question it, saying he died to enemy ninjas. Besides, he was a much easier target. Unlike her, who would be a hard target to catch, and along with Tsuna, they were confined to the medical camp under everyone's watchful eye. Minato had given his hypothesis that they needed someone with very close kinship to Hashirama Senju because the cell research was no coincidence and they were probably using Nawaki's arm for that. At the same time, Minato made a proposal to recover his arm. Ironically, it was the same kind of research Danzo had requested to be authorized, through the third Hokage. This research aimed to reconstruct Nawaki's arm using Mokuton and connect it to the chakra veins in his body, to be able to perform jutsus and move it like a normal arm. Minato basically shared the idea without too many details, since he wasn't a genetic medicine specialist. He only had a notion of how it would work. But that was enough for Tsunade to be able to develop the project through the idea. In the end, she was out of the village not because she was addicted to gambling or drinking, on the contrary, she was quite sober, though she still gambled, but her real reason was indeed because she was using a secret laboratory, one she built herself in a remote area. Also she could develop the arm, using her grandfather's cells, from which she had taken a part of his remains and brought with her when she left the village. She felt somewhat guilty for using Hashirama's body, but it was necessary to rebuild her brother's arm. Danzo was also trying to make the same kind of prosthesis, since he had lost his arm in the war. He won't succeed at that, unless he gets the first Hokage's actual body. Minato had said that Nawaki's arm would still be useless without him having Mokuton. When she heard that, Tsunade made sure to fill her grandfather's tomb with as many fuinjutsus and protections as possible, both explosive and barrier types. The place was highly protected. So much so that even when Minato tried to visit Mito's tomb, he could barely get close to Hashirama's, which was next to the late Uzumaki, because it was too dangerous to approach. Tsunade was still thinking about what to do, but she would head to the laboratory in a few hours. Meanwhile, Minato rejoined his team. The mission was already over.
His group was just waiting for him among the trees.
The mission is over? One of them asked upon seeing Minato.
Yes.
There's nothing else to do here. We should return to the village.
The mission was simple, just escort the scroll to that point. But, before they left, he spoke again.
I want to make a stop. I'm hungry. If you want, I prepared a large amount of ramen yesterday.
Minato said this with a smile on his lips, which surprised everyone. After all, he never offered food in the middle of a mission.
Even so, everyone nodded. Sure, why not? You think I'm going to turn down your food, Commander?
One of them said, and everyone agreed as they advanced through the forest.
Minato quickly chose a spot, took out several bowls of ramen, and began offering them to everyone.
They ate in about 20 minutes, while Hanabi kept watch over the area just in case.
Quickly, they returned to Konoha.
They arrived a few hours later, happy they hadn't traveled on an empty stomach, since the trip had been a bit long, hours to go and hours to return.
I'll report the information to the Hokage. You're free for the rest of the day. Minato gave the order. Quickly, he went to the Hokage's building.
There, he passed on the information, while the Hokage nodded, stamping the successfully completed B-rank mission. After that, Minato left without many words and headed to his apartment. On the way, he looked over the village, gritting his teeth. He ignored the conversations and whispers, but he could clearly hear the rumors about Tsukumo, which among the citizens were getting worse, with open insults even from people Tsukumo himself had saved, who now turned against him. Ignoring all of it, Minato arrived home. Only Makoto was there.
Let me see the scroll, Makoto. Minato said.
She took the scroll from her pocket, the one Hanabi had handed her, and extended it to Minato, who took it and opened it quickly.
Just as I thought. He murmured. There were 2 names written on the scroll, clearly in Hanabi's handwriting. These 2. Makoto murmured as well, stepping closer to see the names.
There was disgust in her tone.
Yes. They work for Danzo.
They're infiltrated in my team. But I was sure they didn't have the tongue seals. That must have been done in the last 6 months.
Minato murmured.
After all, he had offered the ramen specifically to observe his team. He wanted to find out who among them had yielded to Root and were inside his group to monitor him. He had noticed how those 2 avoided eating, pretending to chew while eating slowly to avoid showing their tongues, but that was what gave them away. At the same time, Hanabi, who was at a distance, wasn't just keeping an eye on the outer area, she was checking the group itself. With her Byakugan, from afar, through the trees, she searched for signs of the tongue seal.
What do you plan to do? Makoto asked, with a serious and worried tone. Fortunately, I don't think it will last long.
I'm sure the elders will try to control me completely. With the information I have, they'll probably remove me from our team and assign me only to Root members, and I'll be just a subordinate.
Minato said. So, it doesn't really matter now. He added.
He already anticipated that they planned to corner him. Not that he was worried about that, in fact, he even thought it might be useful.
And it will be at that moment that you'll have the chance to leave the Anbu. Minato said, looking firmly at Makoto. He knew they would be sent far away.
When chaos started in Konoha, he would need access to them easily, to protect them, and if they weren't in the Anbu and remained in the village, it would be much easier.
Makoto nodded, understanding. Yes. Obviously, if we're no longer on your team, we'll leave the Anbu, Minato. Minato nodded as well.
All right. Now we just have to be careful and see how the elders will play. We'll have to make our moves based on theirs, he said, with a serious look.
Chapter 235.
The son of the village's Shame 01.
Third-person POV. Konoha, year 42.
Minato was alone, observing his house with the construction in progress that morning, while checking the site to make sure everything was going as planned. The house had 300 square meters on each of the floors, with 2 floors in total, and dozens of rooms and social areas such as the entrance hall, the kitchen, as well as other spaces like a library, storage rooms, and even a vault. The structure of the house was perfectly well built, and now the team was working on the structural finishing and decoration.
There were about 4 more months until everything was finished.
It was strange for Minato to walk through the already built corridors, even though there were still some open spaces due to being unfinished. That house would soon be ready, but would he really enjoy it the way he imagined, knowing very well what was about to happen? The land outside was also immense. The house was surrounded by hundreds of trees with a large forest, and there was only one main entrance and exit, although, for a ninja, that was almost irrelevant.
Minato knew he intended to receive civilians, so there was an open area with a pathway leading into the property.
There was also plenty of space available for expansion to other constructions, should it be necessary in the future. Minato had invested a significant amount to acquire all that land for a reason, even if it was a bit far from the village center.
I guess it's time. Let me go, Minato murmured, as he was about to leave. That day, there was no one working on the construction. The workers were off. That's why Minato was checking the place to see how it was coming along. Still, when he was about to go home to meet the girls, Minato felt something peculiar in that moment. It's him. I've never felt such frustration. But that's a feeling to be expected after what happened. He commented to himself, before disappearing in the next instant. He moved along the side of the house, where there were training fields on the property and where he used to come with Kushina. He kept walking there until he reached more distant areas, amid the vegetation that lay beyond his lands. There, he found a young boy training. The boy kept one arm lowered, supporting it with the other while trying to concentrate a streak of lightning in his palm, but failed. The jutsu slipped away, unstable, and seemed to hurt him. His body still wasn't used to that type of release yet. The boy raised his hand in frustration, feeling the burn caused by the attempt. Then, he suddenly turned toward the trees, alert, pulling out a kunai. "Who?" he said, knowing someone was there, and as much as Minato wasn't trying to hide his presence, he had to admit the boy had the senses of a jounin at such a young age. Minato appeared shortly after, landing about 5 meters from the boy and looking around. He noticed the area full of kunai stuck in trees and holes in the ground and rocks. Kakashi was surprised to see who it was, but didn't even get to speak before Minato simply started talking. "You're trying to perform the jutsu at this age." "Impressive," Minato commented, while the boy, wearing a mask and with white hair, looked at him with frustration and even a bit of shame. "Don't feel ashamed for trying to perform a jutsu just by hearing about it," Minato said, approaching with a softer look. He wanted to see the boy, but was certainly impressed to recognize the jutsu the boy was trying. It was the same jutsu he had invented years ago. It seemed Kakashi, naturally talented, had taken an interest in that technique and was trying to replicate it, and even younger than Minato had been when he developed it. After all, Minato developed it at age 9. Even without ever having seen it performed personally, or having someone directly teach him, Kakashi was trying to replicate it just based on what he'd heard. It was kind of ironic, a situation like that. After all, he had done the same thing. Stolen the Chidori Jutsu from the original Kakashi even before the time when the boy had created and performed it. And now, Kakashi was trying to create it too, at only 8 years old. But Minato doubted he would actually manage to master it in a year or two. The Chidori was not easy to perform. And Minato had neglected the jutsu to learn other things during his early years of training. That's why he hadn't done it earlier, even though he developed it later on. He was a genius at creating jutsus, so he created it easily after developing his nature chakra. "Why are you here? Spying on me?" Kakashi asked, returning with a serious expression. He didn't like the idea of someone watching him, especially Minato. "Well, you can't really do much about it. After all, I live right next door. Or at least, I will." "I was looking at my house when I sensed your presence and saw you were training," Minato replied casually. "I'm not stealing your jutsu," Kakashi immediately said. "I'm creating my own," he defended himself, as if wanting to make it clear he wasn't plagiarizing anything. I'm not complaining that you're using this jutsu, Kakashi.
Not at all, Minato said, as he raised his arm with a storage armband. He tapped it, and a scroll appeared amidst the smoke. He simply tossed it to Kakashi, who caught it, surprised. If you want to learn the Chidori, this is its scroll. An A-rank jutsu. This will save months or even years. Minato said. You're giving me your jutsu? Kakashi couldn't believe it, holding the scroll in surprise. Jutsus were something very valuable, and the less common ones, like this one in Kakashi's hand, were usually restricted to clans or to the village's jutsu scroll. Each clan had its specialty, and even civilians who created rare techniques rarely shared them, since many had already been killed or robbed after selling them. It was common for powerful clans to seize jutsus created by others, even civilians, during the times of constant warfare. There was also a way to receive them through the village, but that was an uncommon practice only for people who truly carried out extraordinary work and missions, protecting the village and its inhabitants. And depending on what they had done, higher-level jutsus were given to those ninjas, like Minato fighting against an entire group of infiltrators and saving several Umbus, and his heroic actions during the war.
Why? Kakashi asked, looking at Minato with suspicion. No one gave away a jutsu like that. Because, just like I saw in Makoto when I passed this jutsu to her, I see potential in you. You're already training your element, started early, and have talent. And having some powerful jutsus can save your life on missions, Minato said sincerely. The boy said nothing. He just looked at the jutsu, thoughtful. At the same time, he lifted his head as he saw lightning in the air coming from Minato without warning. He looked at Minato raising one of his hands. The lightning burst from his Raikiri, which was a Chidori improved by being even more powerful, now an S-rank jutsu and even superior technique. And Minato controlled it with ease. He had developed it during the war and now executed it without needing hand seals or preparation. The jutsu was created automatically, in a matter of milliseconds. Understand one thing, Kakashi. This jutsu is just the first step, Minato said, turning back to face the boy. You'll have to develop it on your own. Just like Makoto created various variations with the lightning element, you'll have to create your own as well. He spoke while extending his hand forward. In the next moment, the lightning forming in Minato's hand began to harden and projected straight out, like a spear of energy. The attack pierced through the air with precision and violently lodged into a nearby tree, penetrating the trunk as the entire impacted area began to heat up due to lightning being extremely hot by nature. The electric spear glowed for an instant before disappearing with a crack, leaving deep marks in the charred wood. This was the same ability Sasuke created with Chidori, while Minato developed it with Raikiri. Minato then concluded. This application is just one of many. One day, you'll create your own. Kakashi looked, impressed by what he had just seen. His eyes gleamed, but his face remained serious. Why are you helping me? He repeated, breaking the silence. Minato raised an eyebrow, staring at him. What do you mean by that? He asked. You're helping me, the son of the village's disgrace. I thought no one would want to be near me now, Kakashi replied, his voice low, almost bitter. Minato began walking toward the boy. His head was lowered, face hidden by the shadow of his own fringe. Kakashi stared at him, confused, trying to predict what would happen. But he didn't have time to react. Suddenly, Minato delivered a direct punch to the boy's face, hard. Kakashi was thrown several meters back, rolling through the grass before hitting the ground, stunned. Minato then spoke, with a stern look. How can you say something like that, about your own father? Why did you do that? Kakashi stood up, angry. Because I expected to hear that from anyone in the village, but from his own son? Are you really as ungrateful to your father as the village is being? Minato looked at him with a bit of anger. Why are you saying that? Everyone thinks he's a disgrace. You should think the same. Kakashi spoke while rubbing the spot where Minato had struck. Look at him, he's Kakashi Hatake, son of Tsukumo. They say he's talented enough to graduate at age 5 and become a chunin at 6, can you believe that? His father too, wasn't he talented to the point of becoming a hero?
Now he brings shame to the whole village. He should give up being a ninja, the village only benefits from that.
True, his son should act the same way.
He'll be just like his father, no matter how impressive he becomes, he'll bring great losses to the village.
Why does he have a headband?
Someone take it from him, as punishment for what his father did. Kakashi began to recall the comments he had been receiving over the past few days. His father seemed worn down and no longer left the clan's walls, and Kakashi himself looked at him with contempt.
I won't be like you, he thought as he looked at his father.
I'll prove to everyone that I'll complete my missions without failure and won't be a disgrace to the Leaf Village. He had those thoughts all the time, that's why he isolated himself on this side of the village to train. He wanted to develop a jutsu powerful enough, he intended to surpass his father and stay far from his image of incompetence. I remember you used to wield a sword like everyone in the Hatake clan.
Is that why you don't have it on your back anymore? Out of shame of resembling your father?
Minato asked again with a serious look, gazing at Kakashi with a certain disappointment. He knew this would happen. Kakashi himself would develop his individualist personality even further, and the ideology that all ninjas should do whatever was necessary to complete their missions, even if it meant leaving their comrades behind or even killing them to avoid compromising the mission. But Minato, even already expecting something like that, couldn't hold himself back. He felt real anger upon hearing those words.
Chapter 236, The Son of the Village's Shame 02. Third Person POV. Konoha, Year 42.
Yes. Kakashi said, although he was a little surprised by Minato's outburst of anger.
So you think your father was wrong? In saving his comrades while sacrificing his mission? Minato asked in a grim tone. And you think he was right?
Kakashi shot back.
Of course I do. Kakashi, do you think we should trample over our allies to achieve our goals? Minato asked, even more serious now.
This was the same mindset as the village, which brings up the case of the Uzumaki who are now in a situation without even knowing what's coming for them at this moment.
And isn't that the ninja way we should follow?
You are a ninja who stood out ever since you were in the academy, even graduating at 10 years old. You became a ninja with a set of jutsus that even Jonin usually don't possess. You had already taken down an entire team of Chunin who had infiltrated the village on your own. He spoke with Minato, feeling a sense of frustration. He's jealous. He always told me he'd surpass me and I should have expected that when he graduated at 5 years old and is already a Chunin at 8. I saw in some reports that he's already taken down some people, even Chunin, but no one likes to work with him and he keeps switching teams, precisely because of those thoughts that a ninja is a tool who must put their team first.
Minato thought as he sensed Kakashi's feelings in his voice.
It was clear that Kakashi not only looked up to his father but also to the one considered the greatest genius in the history of the Leaf Village. At the same time he was standing out, he had never truly managed to reach Minato, who by the age of 10 had done extraordinary things and already had S-rank jutsus in his arsenal. Minato thought it must be quite frustrating for Kakashi, who believed he was surpassing Minato, but didn't seem to even come close to what he had done by the end of his time at the academy. As they say, talent doesn't always surpass potential. The original Minato was by nature a unique talent born once in a generation, but when this Minato awakened at 6 years old, he was still training to throw kunai, and when he entered, he was behind many kids in both skills and strength. But that quickly changed in the first year as he began to develop his personal abilities and ended the first year as the #1 student in the class ahead of everyone else, continuing every year to grow his abilities with an ever-increasing gap between him and the others. In the end, Minato had a potential that he developed over the years that surpassed any other talent among his peers. Kakashi created an illusion by believing he was doing better than Minato by graduating early, while Minato chose not to take early graduation, having the chance to evolve even more, since he would be busier with missions if he left the academy, and many followed that same path. No wonder no one else graduated early even though they had learned all the basics already. Minato managed to reach a level by the age of 10 that Kakashi couldn't, whether due to potential or because he had time to develop. That seemed to frustrate Kakashi deeply. You know, when a comrade of mine was poisoned during the war, I wanted to get the antidote for her, but I was forbidden to go and they couldn't form an infiltration team into Suna without the Hokage's authorization, seeing as it was a dangerous mission. Besides, the Hokage would never allow that just to save a ninja lying sick in bed merely waiting to die, like thousands of others before her.
Minato began as Kakashi raised an eyebrow.
Then the blonde continued. So I did something that risked my life, something that could have killed me. I took her poison and put it into my own body. I was also infected by the poison, he said, while Kakashi was visibly surprised by this. This gave me an opening to move forward with this suicide mission. After all, I was just a person waiting to die. The village couldn't stop me now, so I went to Suna alone on an infiltration mission. It took me a few days, but I managed to get where I wanted. I got the antidote and even the formula, escaped to the land of fire with other hostages I had rescued from the cells, and we fought against the Bijou and the Kage of Suna. In the end, you know this event as the first great turning point of the war, where Konoha gained the advantage over the poison. After all, we had the antidote when the poison had just been produced, Minato said. Kakashi still looked at him in utter surprise. If I were in your father's place, I would have done the same thing. So, I can say that I think differently from the village. If I were in your place, I would be proud of my father, because he is more than a tool for the village, he is someone who cares about his comrades. To me those are just words, Kakashi finally replied. He didn't believe Minato truly meant what he was saying. He thought he was just being hypocritical, since he had always had an idealized image in the village. Everyone only ever spoke well of him since the war. Kakashi didn't believe Minato could stand by his words, although he was still surprised by the previous statements. You say that because you don't know me. But let me tell you something, Minato said. I would become a traitor to Konoha to save my comrades. I hope I never reach that point, but I certainly wouldn't hesitate. Because this is my ninja way. I will always fight to protect this village and against everything I believe is wrong. And I see nothing wrong in what your father did. To me, he's a true hero, no matter what the village thinks of him. Minato said this, making Kakashi so surprised for several seconds that he didn't even notice when he approached. Kakashi was still there, staring at the ground, when he felt Minato's gaze and, right after, his hand touching his shoulder. Sorry for the punch. I lost my temper a little, but you deserved it, Minato said in a gentler tone, and continued. If your father made a mistake in your eyes, even though I believe he did the right thing, he is still your father. Either way, I have nothing to do with this anymore, since you're your own person now. Still, it reinforces the idea that you still have a father and he's suffering right now. It's good that you still have this chance to talk to him, because it might be too late, and you could regret it for the rest of your life. I believe that the person you are today, Kakashi, can still change. Don't pressure yourself for perfection, or think that a ninja must follow missions at any cost. Your comrades are just as important or even more than the missions. Because Konoha isn't just the place where we are or the missions we do. Konoha is the people who live here. The place was merely chosen. But if Konoha decided to move somewhere else, the village wouldn't die. It would live on in the heart of all its villagers. Minato finished, releasing his hand from Kakashi's shoulder and beginning to walk away slowly, leaving the place. Kakashi turned slowly and looked at Minato's back, then at the scroll. He bent down, picking it up from the ground where it had fallen after he'd been punched. The A-rank jutsu. Maybe Minato would want it back after what happened, but the blonde just shook his head. No. It's yours. Become a powerful ninja, Kakashi. Learn many strong jutsus, and let one of them protect you and your comrades. With that, Minato simply vanished. Kakashi, originally, only managed to master the Chidori after learning the Rasengan, a technique Minato had taught him. He adapted the form of the Rasengan to channel lightning nature chakra. That scroll was something that would certainly help him develop the technique now. Kakashi stood there, in silence, thoughtful about Minato's words. Not quite sure what to think about it, at least for now. I would become a traitor to Konoha to save my comrades. Minato's words echoed again in Kakashi's mind, leaving him a bit confused by them. He would become a traitor,
really?
Kakashi murmured, wondering if Minato would truly throw everything away. After all, he was a hero and a role model in the village. Meanwhile, Minato appeared in the middle of the village. He didn't go directly to his apartment, he was checking the surroundings, using his observation haki throughout the village. He could feel the Hokage signing some documents, surrounded by several umbu in his building. He could see Kushina washing clothes and hanging them on the clothesline at her house, while umbu discreetly watched the barrier around the home. He saw Makoto preparing lunch for him. Hanabi was training some jutsus in the Hyuga clan's training area, further away from the main zone.
Tsunade was examining some papers beside a nurse at the hospital. He could also sense Danzo sitting in an underground area, surrounded by root ninjas. That was the base of his routine. Minato could feel it perfectly.
There were several children training on the lower levels, all with tongues marked by seals, preparing as Danzo's future forces. He could feel Orochimaru as well, in a forest base, beginning to read scrolls of questionable content. He sensed Madame Garith speaking with some orphanage staff while scolding a few children. He saw Obito helping an old lady cross the street, as he always claimed as his excuse whenever he was late. Kakashi, in turn, was walking back home after that training session. He looked thoughtful as he passed through the early urban areas. People stared at him, some commented, others only whispered all about his father. But his mind was elsewhere.
Minato could feel the entire village and far more than that.
The barriers, the protections, nothing could block his observation haki, and no sensor could detect him. He could see what people were doing in detail, feel their emotions, and even predict their next actions based on the last two. It was the most powerful sensory ability in the world, far beyond merely detecting presences.
But Minato wasn't interested in any of those things. He had found the one he was looking for.
Tsukumo Hatake, sitting in a secluded area of the village, on the opposite side from where Minato had just spoken with Kakashi. Tsukumo was on a bench, lost in thought, and the place was completely deserted, an abandoned part of the village. The emotions Minato felt from him were heavy. He could sense that Tsukumo was seriously beginning to consider suicide, trying to end it all to escape the relentless assault on his reputation. He felt awful, especially when he noticed the way his own son looked at him as if he were a disappointment.
Minato took a deep breath. He decided he would talk to Tsukumo instead of going home.
He simply jumped down from the rooftop and moved toward him, stopping right in front of the man.
Tsukumo raised his head, surprised. His eyes said it all, he believed Minato was there to judge him too. "May I sit?" Minato asked. Tsukumo raised his eyes just a few centimeters, slightly surprised by the approach, but nodded silently. "You know."
"I just met with Kakashi," Minato said directly.
Tsukumo looked at him with a bit more surprise. "Well, where can we start? Maybe with the fact that I punched him in the face?" Minato pondered, thinking aloud, while Tsukumo watched him, still silent, but a little stunned by that. It was time to see if he could change this man's fate. He was certainly someone important to the village. Minato couldn't allow his story to end as a ninja who committed suicide, crushed by life and abandoned by his own friends and comrades. Minato knew Kakashi was the key to this, as he was the person closest to Tsukumo. But even so, he himself decided to try. Chapter 237, To Become the Greatest Swordsman in the World? Third-person POV. Konoha, year 42. Then. I heard a rumor about you talking with Tsukumo Hatake a few days ago. You don't seem to be angry at him. Minato looked to the side, behind his mask, as he saw his teammate asking. He's not a traitor just because he failed a mission. He saved his comrades. Minato, as the leader of his squad, replied to the person. I know, it's a noble attitude. But don't you also see the losses the village had because of his actions? The person insisted, seemingly wanting to hear Minato's true opinion. He already had in mind that this was one of the infiltrators, the one who at least had surrendered to Root and was in his team to spy on him. That conversation caught the attention of some nearby members. It was evident that it was a subject that drew attention with that teammate speaking to Minato. What kind of crime did he really commit? Minato threw the question back and continued. I don't see the village going to war over this. That mission had no direct impact on the village. As far as I know, everyone criticizes him, but no one really knows what the village lost because of it, even you don't know what that loss really was, Minato concluded. That. The ninja was truly speechless, trying to respond to Minato's words. And that was the problem Minato didn't like about Konoha. No one really knew what Tsukumo lost, they just repeated that the information was of great financial value to Konoha. It was a herd mentality, implanted by the village itself. After all, Tsukumo was a powerful candidate to become Hokage, and those old men clearly didn't want to give up their power. In the end, the ninja remained silent, unsure how to respond to Minato for a few seconds. Is that why you're wearing the katana on your back? You believe he did nothing wrong, even though he's considered a disgrace to the village? He asked, looking at the sword on Minato's back. Kakashi may have removed the sword out of shame for his father, but Minato had started using it a few days ago. It was the same weapon, the same style Tsukumo used. Maybe it was Minato's way of saying he supported Tsukumo, even if the village condemned him like a plague. After all, he could very well keep his swords in his storage bracers, but he chose to display it on his back. Tsukumo was a war hero. He saved many people and led great victories for Konoha. It doesn't matter what kind of mission he failed, that doesn't outweigh the achievements he had in the war. And even if the village forgets he was a hero, I'll still remember that. Minato replied to the member of his team. Everyone around heard that with surprise, seeing the motivations of their commander. No one could be forbidden from wearing a katana on their back, but it became a symbol. Even Hiruzen looked at him strangely when he saw it before sending him on the mission, but didn't question it. I understand, it's just that I find it strange coming from you, Commander. You're a hero of Konoha. Aren't you going to stain your image this way too, in front of the village people? He asked. Maybe, Minato shrugged. But I became a hero by doing what I thought was right. And I'll keep doing what I think is right before any title or admiration I might have. He replied. The ninja fell silent after that, while Minato ended any further conversation. Now let's focus on the mission, Minato said, as he raised his hand for everyone to get into position. With small signals, he whistled for the more distant ones to hear quickly, and everyone got ready. The mission was simple. They were to intercept some wagons bringing illicit goods into the Land of Fire, part of an investigation Minato had been conducting for a few months. Because of that, his activity with his team was quite frequent at the border. And so, a few commercial wagons traveled down the road calmly a few hours later, with Minato sensing through his haki that there were guards who seemed like mercenaries, using common swords, indicating they were apparently ordinary people. Makoto, Hanabi, and a few sensors, along with Minato, could see the chakra levels of those men. The latter, through observation haki, could see the real strength of the opponents. We have 5 Jounin and 2 Chunin as bodyguards, Minato said. They were from the land of tea and were bringing the drugs under the disguise of merchants. Minato managed to see the drug contents, even though they were sealed to keep anyone from seeing them. His observation haki didn't prevent him from seeing the content within the barriers. As soon as they got close enough to where the team was positioned near the road, Minato gave the order. Move in. Quickly, the squad advanced along the border road. Pretending to be ordinary people, the enemy ninja immediately noticed the movement and prepared for battle. A kunai quickly landed at their feet, as Minato appeared in front of them, starting to neutralize them. And right behind him, the confrontation began. The jutsus launched by the enemies, upon shedding their mercenary disguises, were countered by jutsus from Minato's team, who quickly defeated the enemies in just a few minutes. With greater numbers and being elite ninjas, Minato had already taken down half of them within seconds. What is this? The man guiding the wagon became immediately concerned, seeing only himself standing, while the others driving the wagons were defeated behind him. These were ordinary people with no ninja training, but were they innocent? You are under arrest and will be taken to the Leaf along with your men for illegally bringing drugs into the Land of Fire, Lumen spoke from behind his mask. Impossible. Why are we being accused of carrying drugs?
The man immediately tried to defend himself, but it was already too late. The simple proof that there were Jounin guarding the cargo, disguised as missionaries and merchants, made it clear they were there illegally. One of the ninjas from Minato's squad threw a small container to Minato, who caught it and opened it, revealing a white powder. He showed the contents to the man, who visibly looked lost upon seeing the evidence.
Detain them.
I'm going to call some teams to escort them to Konoha, Minato said, and vanished in an instant, heading to the village. Upon arriving in the village with the Raijin, he passed the information verbally to the Hokage, who nodded and began summoning a few teams for support.
All right, hold on for a few days, and the teams will arrive, he informed. Minato returned to the location where they were holding the wagon and the arrested men. They waited for about 2 days until 4 teams arrived, one of them being Ino Shikavcho. Minato left the escort with them and returned to the village with his own squad. Well, it looks like you found the first route through which the drugs are entering the Land of Fire. That's good. Now we'll have to take care of the others and find out what those who were captured have to say once we send them for interrogation. The Hokage commented, reading Minato's report. Minato knew that this interrogation wasn't a very pretty place, and enemy ninjas were even tortured there. Minato simply nodded in silence. Anyway, good work. I'll be sending a new mission based on what the intelligence division finds from what we're gathering to detect the other routes. That'll be in the next few days. For now, you have 2 days off, he said, as Minato said his goodbyes, disappearing from the place. He returned to his team's base, giving the final directions, while everyone dispersed, as they would have a few days off. One by one, they left the place. Shall we go home? Mikoto approached Minato. She and Hanabi were the only ones who remained at the location with him. I'm going to do some training at my clan's field, Minato said, while Mikoto nodded and went home alone. Hanabi also accompanied Mikoto to her clan. Minato then stayed there for a while, until he moved toward the path leading to the training field on his property. Meanwhile, in the Hokage's building, Danzu and Hiruzen were standing before a ninja, none other than members of Minato's team. They were 2 spy members. So you asked what Minato was doing with Tsukumo? Danzu questioned. Yes, Danzu-sama. He said he doesn't see Tsukumo as a disgrace to the village. He said that no matter what mission he failed, he's still a war hero, the ninja replied. I see. I must admit the boy's courage, Hiruzen murmured. You may leave us now, Danzu requested. The 2 ANBUs disappeared, leaving the 2 advisors alone. Even the guards had left the room so that only the 2 of them remained, and no one could hear what they had to discuss. Do you see a problem with this? Hiruzen commented, breaking the silence. That boy, he's a problem, Danzu said. He's making a symbolic gesture in support of Hatake, and that could compromise us. We need to get rid of him. Or do you want to lose your position as Hokage? Danzu said coldly. Tsukumo has practically already given up on the ninja life. There's no reason for us to keep pushing this, Hiruzen argued, having already achieved the goal they had with all of this. Tsukumo no longer accepted missions, didn't attend meetings, and barely left his house. His prestige and influence were in decline, and even though Hiruzen thought it was all too harsh, Danzu had already convinced him that it was for the best, for the stability of the village and to keep them in power, since there was no one better than them to know what was good for the village. But we still have another problem, Danzu continued. Don't forget, that boy is scheming something. We must keep an eye on him. He's dangerous. Although they didn't have any proof yet, Danzu was sure that Minato could ruin everything. Especially the plan involving the agreement with other villages, the agreement to eliminate the Uzumaki. Minato already knew something from capturing those ninjas and the order he had received to release them more than a month ago. Let's change his team, Danzu finally suggested. We can also speed up the destruction of Tsukumo's reputation, he added. All right. Do what you must, Hiruzen replied with a tired look. Danzu left the building shortly afterward. Meanwhile, Minato was standing in a training field, until he finally sensed someone approaching.
You came, he said, a slight smile forming as he recognized who it was.
The person approaching was none other than Tsukumo Hatake, the famous White Fang of Konoha.
Yes.
I thought about what you said, Minato.
And I'm going to train you in the art of the sword, he said, with his hand resting on the hilt of his own katana. Somehow, Minato had managed to convince him to regain his self-esteem. And he had also managed to get Tsukumo to begin teaching the skills of a swordsman, and there was no one better in the world than Tsukumo, considered one of the greatest in history.
If he could combine the power Tsukumo possessed with his own armament haki.
Minato believed he could cut through even mountains, like the greatest swordsmen in the world of One Piece were capable of doing.
Chapter 238 Learning the Hatake Swordsmanship. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42.
The first thing I want to refine as a swordsman is your technique, in other words, your own fencing. You've already said you trained with the late Yuki Hatake for a while, during the war. I'd like to see those skills, Tsukumo said to Minato.
Minato nodded as he removed his sword from the right side of his back.
The blade wasn't very long, being a copy of the one Tsukumo used. Meanwhile, the White Fang of Konoha also drew his sword from the sheath in his hands.
I want you to attack me with everything you've got.
I want to see your current strength, Tsukumo requested, as Minato took his fighting stance. In the next moment, without warning, Minato used Saru, vanishing from his spot and appearing in front of Tsukumo, swinging his sword in a vertical slash.
Tsukumo quickly defended like lightning, the metallic sound of the blades echoing as they clashed.
He was pushed back a few steps.
Damn!
I forgot how physically strong you already are, he muttered, stopping for a moment. Quickly, he tried to push Minato away with a counterattack, but Minato noticed that Tsukumo wasn't at his peak. His mental condition was still affecting him. He clearly seemed weakened.
Minato could feel all his internal worries, a bomb of bad feelings.
Even so, Minato repositioned himself and advanced again.
The fight continued, with both exchanging blows in an intense sequence. Minato was truly giving it his all.
In every move, he applied everything he had learned from his former teacher, Ghost or Yuki Hatake, when he was part of the Phantom Squad. Even with Tsukumo in a weakened state, Minato had to admit, his fencing was still nowhere near his level. Not even Yuki had that level, perhaps in terms of swordsmanship, only Hanzo, the salamander, could be an ideal opponent for Tsukumo. The fight went on for quite some time, the sound of swords filling the training field. It was only after several minutes that they finally stopped.
Well, I can't say you're a beginner.
You're at an intermediate level, but your skill is good, Tsukumo said, looking at Minato with a certain satisfaction. Still, it seems I have a lot to learn. Well, it's not that you're bad, Minato replied, looking at his sword. Yes, anyway, I'd like to improve your technique first before we begin chakra refinement to apply to the sword, Tsukumo said, as Minato nodded, finally able to learn something incredible here.
Please, continue, Minato requested.
Tsukumo then walked to the center of the field and began demonstrating a series of movements. He repeated them 5 times, lateral slashes, descending slashes, all using only one hand, and coordinating the movements with the body.
Minato watched attentively, memorizing each move.
With plenty of experience with his own body, he quickly began to replicate the strikes with precision. This is the first combat stance I want to teach you.
But you must get used to them.
After all, you don't have a Sharingan, and you'll need to make your body create muscle memory, Tsukumo commented, as Minato nodded. Minato first performed the move identical to what was shown by Tsukumo, demonstrating that he had already mastered it. Now he needed to make his brain and body get used to it. Then, crossing his fingers, Minato created around 200 clones with a burst of smoke. I'll leave them training the movements, while I'd like to move on to the next phase.
If it's not asking too much, Sir Tsukumo, Minato requested.
Well, all right, Tsukumo murmured, scratching his head as he watched the clones training the same movements in the middle of the field. It was a surprising way to increase his training hundreds of times over. It was no wonder Minato had achieved so much at such a young age, in Tsukumo's opinion.
The next step was chakra refinement. Tsukumo began teaching Minato how to channel chakra into the blade.
Something Tsukumo himself did to the point of making his sword glow white, just like Minato had seen before, when he witnessed Tsukumo cutting even the two tails with a single strike. But this wasn't an easy technique to master. It was somewhat like infusing one's own armament haki into objects, which was far more difficult for Minato than applying it to his own body. Since his spirit naturally had that form, channeling haki into himself was simple. However, transferring it to objects required a deep understanding of one's own spiritual strength, and here, Minato wasn't just referring to chakra. In any case, he spent the entire afternoon training with Tsukumo, practicing both the movements and the refinement of the technique. By the end of the day, he had fully mastered the first part, the strikes and stances, but would still need to work on the chakra refinement.
"This is good," Tsukumo commented at the end of the afternoon. "You've already learned the entire first fencing stance.
It's more than 100 sets of movements, but I'm sure you'll learn the next ones I developed much faster." These were techniques from the Hatake clan. Obviously, they were exclusive to the clan members, designed for quick and lethal offenses. However, Minato had made a bold request by saying he wanted to learn them, and he wanted to know if Tsukumo would accept to teach them when he saw him in such a state a few days ago after seeing Kakashi. His son, Kakashi, no longer used swords. He had refused to wield them again ever since the rumors about his father had spread through the village. Tsukumo, in turn, had practically abandoned the ninja life. And there, in that moment, there was no one left to carry on the legacy of the Hatake clan. So he accepted Minato's request. At the very least, this way, the Hatake clan would not die with its last two members. "Certainly, it's incredible," Minato said, sheathing the sword, visibly satisfied with his progress on the first day. This moment was also a great opportunity to resume training his armament haki, which he had put aside over the last year to focus on developing his observation haki.
"Anyway, I'll be heading off. You still have the day off tomorrow, so?" Tsukumo suggested. "Yes, we can continue tomorrow," Tsukumo replied. "Are you moving back to the village?" Minato asked, watching Tsukumo preparing to leave. He knew Tsukumo no longer moved over rooftops like before. He walked through places like a normal person, a silent way of saying he was no longer a ninja. "Then, let me walk with you," Minato said. "Wait. It wouldn't be very good for you to be seen at my side," Tsukumo murmured, head down. But Minato shook his head in refusal. "Of course not. Don't let those idiots treat you that way. You've done far more for this village than you lost in a mission."
"Only fools believe otherwise," Minato said, stepping closer to him. Tsukumo still seemed a bit lost in his own feelings. But, in that moment, maybe he felt he wasn't as alone as he thought. Then, they left the training field and walked through the village, quickly reaching the urban area, where they started to be noticed. Ninjas and civilians began whispering and discreetly pointing at them, starting a wave of gossip. "It's him. Tsukumo Hatake. But he's walking next to Minato Namikaze. Why is Minato walking beside that useless man? He shouldn't be associating with that kind, the shame of the village. I don't get it. Someone called a hero of the leaf, walking with its disgrace? What's wrong with him?" The whispered gossip surrounded the two. None loud enough for Minato to hear clearly, at least, not on purpose. With Tsukumo, they might even have the courage to speak up, but with Minato, no. Meanwhile, Minato looked quite relaxed, walking casually with his hands behind his neck. Even hearing some murmurs around, he showed no discomfort. On the contrary, walking beside Tsukumo, he gave a slight smile. Tsukumo glanced at him and also allowed a small, closed smile to appear. And so, the two continued walking through the entire village, while stares, whispers, and pointing didn't cease. Some still looked strangely at Minato for carrying the sword on his back, a posture similar to what Tsukumo used, and that was exactly the image he wanted to portray anyway. It was at that moment that Kakashi, passing over the rooftops, saw the scene. His eyes immediately focused on his father, walking side by side with Minato. He was surprised by it, and clearly, Minato was also being criticized. That left him shaken inside. "Even if I'm declared a traitor, if it's to save my comrades, I won't hesitate. I'll fight for what's right.
Minato's words echoed again in Kakashi's mind. One day it may be too late for your father, and maybe you'll regret it for the rest of your life.
Other words resonated, as he averted his gaze and walked back home, silent and thoughtful. "See you later, Tsukumo," Minato said his farewell, giving him a slight nod. The man simply nodded, entering his clan home, agreeing to meet again at the field to train, and Minato disappeared a moment later. What Minato wanted with all that was clear, to declare his support for Tsukumo in front of the entire village. Whether that would have a positive or negative impact on his image, he didn't care. The important thing was to prevent Tsukumo from committing his eventual suicide, and for that, he believed he was doing the right thing. After all, he had achieved something that few ever would, making Tsukumo accept him as a disciple, and that would bring a sense of duty to the powerful swordsman. The next day, Minato trained again with Tsukumo. The veteran had given him the precious scroll of the Hataki forms, containing all the movements of the clan's secret style. It was an invaluable gift. A true treasure, and Minato knew its worth. He was determined to fully master that style, and with it, honor the name of the clan. Minato continued the training, and just when he thought he would finally return to active duty with his team, he received a direct summons from the Hokage himself. He was called to the main building, even before his team could be reassembled. When Minato arrived at the Hokage's building, Hiruzen was already waiting for him. "Minato, it's good that you came. After all, we need to talk about something serious," he began, while Minato simply nodded, allowing the Hokage to continue. "I spoke with the other advisors, and we believe your abilities would be better utilized in another team. Therefore, we'll be transferring you to the western border, with a new formation," he said. Minato raised an eyebrow, but, surprisingly, nodded without question at that moment. Deep down, he knew there was no point in fighting against a decision made by those old men. He had expected it. He knew that, sooner or later, he would be pushed aside. This was clearly a maneuver by Danzo and the Hokage, who had likely placed a root team around him to spy on him, or eliminate him. The transfer to the other side of the country was a way to remove him from everything he had been investigating. "They don't want me interfering now that I already know about the information concerning other villages spying on the Uzumaki clan." But Danzo and Hiruzen aren't wrong to fear that, thought Minato. "I see. Even if I ask not to go, I have no choice, right?" Minato narrowed his eyes. "No," Hiruzen replied bluntly. "We always choose what's best for the village. And your assignment to this new team will help us with some problems in that region. You don't have any issue with that, do you?" he asked, narrowing his eyes as well. "No," Minato replied firmly. Accepting the mission didn't mean submission. On the contrary, he knew this could open new opportunities for his own plans. Even being watched by a new team, he would still be in the ANBU, and with that, he could use loopholes to act in silence. "Very well. You may meet with your old team and explain the situation," Hiruzen said at last. Minato simply nodded and left the place, disappearing the next moment. Chapter 239, We Need to Get Stronger. 01. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Here is my resignation from the ANBU. The young Uchiha approached the Hokage with the mission. On the same day Minato came to inform them that he would be switching teams. Hanabi was with her, wearing an indifferent expression, while Hiruzen guided his gaze down to the papers in his hands. They were formal documents of resignation from the ANBU, well prepared, almost not looking like they were put together today. After all, they came here after Minato informed the village leadership's decision. "I see. So you've left the team. I'm sure you could still contribute to the village if you stayed. You're both excellent shinobi for assault and tracking," he said, fully aware of the potential the girl from the Uchiha clan and the girl from the Hyuga clan held. "I no longer feel comfortable staying in the ANBU. There's no reason for us to stay there anymore," Makoto replied with a serious tone, while the Hokage merely sighed, also knowing that Hanabi shared the same feeling. "Very well. The village will accept your request to leave the ANBU," Hiruzen said, accepting it, as Makoto and Hanabi nodded. "And what do you plan to do? Will you resume missions?" "You'll need a team if that's the case," he asked.
No. We'll take some time off to train, Makoto replied, as the Hokage nodded, seeing no issue with that.
But, of course, he knew they weren't being entirely honest.
They didn't want to rejoin any team immediately.
They probably needed to find a suitable group on their own.
All right.
You're dismissed then, Hiruzen said, as Makoto and Hanabi nodded, leaving the place.
Looks like we left faster than we thought. Good thing we already had our resignation letters ready, Hanabi murmured with a serious tone. Yeah. Minato was right that they would do this. Makoto replied.
They hadn't even waited to be introduced to the new captain.
As soon as Minato brought the new information, they immediately asked for leave to go to the Hokage's office and demanded their exit from the ANBU that very morning.
While Minato proceeded with his new team, Makoto felt a little concerned for him. But that was his decision, and she trusted that he could handle anything, even if she wasn't by his side all the time anymore.
Leaving the office, they headed toward Minato's apartment.
Hanabi also wanted to speak with him after everything that happened that day. Quickly, they began leaping across rooftops, advancing toward the center of Konoha.
Minato had an apartment given by the village itself.
They approached the door. Makoto paused for a moment, holding the key, while her gaze drifted to the side.
Hanabi also looked. It was the neighbor's door.
The same woman who, over a year ago, had strange intentions toward Minato.
But that was over. Makoto had put an end to that personally, with force.
When she saw the situation, she showed no mercy to the lady, and since then, that woman had never dared to approach Minato again.
What are you looking at, woman? Makoto murmured, activating her Sharingan.
The neighbor, frightened, quickly shut the door. She no longer dared to spy on that handsome young man, for she knew she had no chance. Her dreams of winning him over were crushed by Makoto's firm presence, whom the old woman now labeled as violent and crazy. Either way, they entered without saying another word, closing the door.
Minato's going to take a while. I'm going to lie down for a bit, Makoto murmured, while Hanabi nodded.
I'm going to train my chakra, she said, pulling out some scrolls and sitting on the floor, beginning to open them. Makoto took the comforter off the clothesline she had washed yesterday and placed it on the bed before relaxing a little. Since she no longer wanted to be part of the ANBU, she also grabbed a few scrolls and started doing the same as Hanabi, who remained seated on the floor.
Makoto began reading while lying on the bed. Minato was in trouble, she murmured, taking the tension out of her voice.
She was holding one of the scrolls, eyes fixed on it as if it were obvious.
You know he always does everything alone. He's always been the strongest, the one who takes the lead in everything.
You know that's always frustrated me, she murmured, speaking directly to Hanabi, obviously. You and your clan always want to be the strongest, Hanabi said, while Makoto looked at her, raising an eyebrow.
That's not what I mean, Hanabi.
Minato is in trouble, and we shouldn't leave everything for him to solve.
You know that's wrong.
But, compared to him, we're not stronger. Not even my eye can compare to his sensory ability. No matter how much we train, he always ends up way stronger, Hanabi commented.
Yes, that's true. But are we just going to let him drift away from us? Are we giving up that easily?
We need to get stronger, Makoto said with a serious look.
We're trying, Makoto. But what else do you think would be enough? Hanabi murmured.
She didn't believe she could reach Minato's level, even though she truly wanted to help him. After all, like all of them, Hanabi loved him.
I will get stronger, Hanabi.
I swear to you I'll become much stronger.
I'll protect Minato.
I'll fight by his side, Makoto said, as her Sharingan activated, transforming into the Manjiki Sharingan right there while still lying down and looking at the scroll. Hanabi stayed silent upon seeing that, but was certainly impressed by the confidence Makoto had. She didn't respond and went back to handling the scrolls, while Makoto deactivated her Sharingan, returning to her reading. After a while, Makoto placed the scroll she was reading next to the bed and remained lying down, waiting for time to pass. They both only got up to eat something in the middle of the day, and afterward Makoto resumed her chakra control training just like Hanabi. It was only late in the afternoon that Minato returned to the apartment, appearing in the middle of the living room.
"You two are here,"
he murmured with a sigh, looking mentally exhausted.
"How's your team?"
Makoto asked from a corner of the house, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, staring at him seriously. "They're all from the root, as I expected," Minato said. He could definitely feel all the emotions coming from that squad: caution, fear, anger, even envy. He knew they were all watching him closely.
Minato had only done a formal introduction, learning each of their names.
While speaking briefly, he had already memorized each of their files. There was no need to ask about dreams or goals, as these weren't genin fresh out of the academy, but rather a group trained and molded by the ANBU to protect the village, even more so, emotionless puppets produced by Danzu.
"Are you in danger?" Hanabi asked, worried. "No. Even though they're all jounin, with 5 of them being elite jounin, none of them can hurt me. None of them know much about my intangibility.
I'm sure the Hokage and Danzu have heard of it. They're always keeping an eye on the rumors about my abilities, but as far as I know, they don't know exactly how it works. So I believe they think I have some kind of light clone or something like that," Minato said. Because if they really knew about his powers, they would have the whole village chasing after him to study the light fruit Minato possessed.
Either way, that's going to save me.
Besides that, I still have a bit of light speed, Minato added, quite confident.
Hanabi nodded.
Makoto agreed too, knowing that if he said everything was fine and that he could handle the group, then he was really telling the truth. "But, you yourself said the village assassinated Tsukumo Hataki's reputation.
Why wouldn't they do the same to you, Minato?"
"You must be careful," Makoto warned.
"I'll deal with them in the most appropriate way possible. Either way, I'll just manage it for now.
I'll be in the ANBU doing missions on the western side of the country, but I'll be around at the same time if you need my help," he said, while Makoto and Hanabi nodded.
"Anyway, I hope you left something for me." Minato smiled as he moved toward the kitchen to grab something to eat. After that, Hanabi left Minato's apartment and returned to her clan.
On the way, she first stopped by the Senju clan, going there to find Tsunade and inform her about her departure, along with Makoto, from the ANBU.
"I see.
I couldn't go there today, but I'll speak with Makoto by tomorrow," Tsunade said, a little surprised by the decision.
Hanabi left the house, and soon after saw Minato reappear at the entrance of Kushina's residence. He greeted her briefly and went on to see the red-haired Uzumaki.
Hanabi, meanwhile, returned to the Hyuga clan.
She was thoughtful about everything.
She passed through the clan gates without anyone stopping her. Everyone feared her in a way, and ever since those events, she was never bothered again. After all, when someone tried to activate the seal that had been placed on her forehead, they were suddenly struck so fast that they didn't even have time to react. Thanks to Minato and his Raijin, a signal was sent as soon as Hanabi felt pain from the seal. Of course, many questions arose. They even threatened her grandfather. But every time they tried to tighten the control of the seal, they were attacked as well. In the end, after sending 24 members, among them leaders and even elders of the clan, to the hospital, speaking about Hanabi became taboo.
No one stopped her from anything anymore.
Even though she was still verbally restrained, Hanabi was firm, saying she would act the same way again. That was her way of fighting in her ninja path. And she would never abandon her friends or stop using her bow, the weapon she had developed herself and which had become her main companion in battle, being the only Hyuga capable of casting spells at long range. She approached her house and found her grandfather watering some plants that night.
"So, my granddaughter.
You've arrived," he murmured, looking at her directly with his white eyes.
"Have you eaten already?" he asked next.
"Yes, I have, Grandpa. I'm going to lie down," she said at last, still not mentioning her departure from the ANBU.
She'd leave that for the next day.
She went straight to her room, lying down on her bed on the floor.
She was thinking about Minato.
Surely, he would be in a difficult situation. But at the same time, she remembered Makoto's words.
"We have to get strong so we can help and keep up with Minato. Makoto's voice echoed in her mind, not just as a warning, but as a calling. Strong.
Then I must try to do that too, she murmured, trying to push away the thought that she would never catch up to Minato. She would help him, whether as a companion, wife, or warrior. She would grow stronger, even though she was already one of the strongest and most respected kunoichi of her clan. That's why no one dared mess with her anymore. Even so, Hanabi believed she needed to evolve further, so she would. She would become even more powerful, easily surpassing any other Hyuga that had ever existed. Chapter 240, We Need to Get Stronger. 02. Third-person POV. Konoha, Year 42. Minato had left early, meeting his new MBU team and leaving the village before the sun even rose for the mission. Makoto got up a few hours later that morning with a sigh. She prepared things, coffee, some stuffed bread, and ate alone until someone appeared at the apartment window. With a light knock, Makoto saw Tsuna entering the place. You came quickly. Skipped work, she asked, looking at Tsuna, since she had asked Hanabi to pass on some formations. She hadn't expected her to come so early the next day. Yeah, I took the day off from the hospital. Anyway, I heard about Minato. Has he already left the village? She asked, with a tone of concern. Yes, he left early in the morning, Makoto commented. And to think the Hokage would really do something like that. Tsuna murmured with a certain anger, wondering if her great-grandfather would agree with what the village was about to do. Anyway, let's eat and go somewhere more open, she said, while Tsuna nodded, following her. It was a bit strange for the two of them to be alone. They had always been rivals throughout their academy days and in recent years, but they ate in silence, filling the air with a respectful atmosphere between them. After eating and leaving the apartment, they soon headed to Training Ground 7. We have to help Minato, Makoto said with a serious look, while Tsuna nodded. That's true. We have to surpass ourselves. A voice came before Tsuna could answer, as someone approached them. It was none other than Hanabi, who also wanted to join them. Makoto raised an eyebrow, since Hanabi didn't seem so confident yesterday, when they had this same conversation. Don't look at me like that. I thought it over. We should help Minato. We can't expect him to do everything alone, she said, with a serious look. Yeah, and now that you're out of the ANBU, we should focus on that, Tsuna said, with an equally serious look. But, do we actually know what we're going to do? She asked them again, wanting to know if they had any ideas. After all, getting stronger was a pretty vague goal. I don't think there's a concrete plan for all of us, Hanabi murmured. Yeah, I agree with Hanabi. After all, we're different kinds of ninjas. No training is going to be equally useful for all three of us, Makoto added, and Tsuna nodded. I think you're right. No one knows better than ourselves what kind of training. It's time for me to go to Shikatsu Forest, Tsuna murmured. She was preparing to undertake the Sage Mode training her mother had failed. She was determined to succeed, as she would need it if she wanted to be useful. I'm going to look for something for myself, Makoto said thoughtfully. I'll have to find some ways to further enhance my jutsu, Hanabi murmured, while Tsuna looked at her. Don't worry about that. I can provide some scrolls that will be useful, if you'd like to accept them, she said. Tsuna, being from the Senju clan, had some powerful earth-style jutsus that could be useful for Hanabi's original chakra nature. They stayed talking and debating a bit about what to do. In the end, the three of them split up. Tsuna left the place and went straight to her clan, where she headed to Kushina's house. The girl greeted her as soon as she sensed her presence, opening the door, and she entered the place. Can you block the sound, Kushina? She asked affectionately. Kushina narrowed her eyes and nodded before making a sign with a single hand. Chains began to emerge from her back, quickly surrounding them in a circle, creating a circular barrier with the design of the Matina's chains around them. Listen. This can't leave this room, she began to speak about what they had discussed, and Kushina felt the weight of it. I understand. Minato talked a little about what happened, she said, but felt a bit nervous, remembering another conversation Minato had with her yesterday. Listen, Kushina.
Soon, we should begin the training to control the fox's chakra. Minato had said with a serious look, inside the same barrier he had created yesterday so that no ANBU could hear their conversation. Kushina was a bit nervous about having to face the fox inside her, but she knew she needed to do it to become stronger and be able to help and protect Minato. In the end, Suna left the place, while Kushina said goodbye to her and moved on to the main house. She closed the door and went to one of the rooms. I'll finish this soon, she decided, in a place full of scrolls spread out on the floor. There was a large one, with a huge brush and a big jar of chakra ink. This was a scroll she was creating for Minato, a summoning contract he had requested. It was quite complex, but she didn't have much else to do, so she had started working on it a week ago. It would be ready in the next few days. They had agreed he would use it for that talking fish that lives in the south of the Land of Fire. Meanwhile, Suna entered her house. Her uncle was preparing lunch. "Hello, uncle," she said, while Nawaki nodded, seeing the little comb tied in her hair. "How are you?" he asked. "Good. Look, I'm just going to grab some scrolls to give to Hanabi Hyuga." "Is that okay?" she asked, while her uncle raised an eyebrow. "Wait a second, Suna, what do you mean by that?" "Why are you going to give away our scrolls?" he asked suspiciously, since they were a treasure of the Senju family. "Minato was removed from the ANBU team," she replied, while Nawaki raised his other eyebrow. "There will come a time when we must act. And the girls want to get stronger. Hanabi doesn't have much support from her clan, being from the branch family. That's why I'm going to help her with our scrolls." "I hope that's not a problem," she said seriously, while Nawaki nodded. "All right. Take whatever you need from there," he said in the end. She nodded and went down to the family vault, entering as she released the door seal, knowing the password through Fuinjutsu. Upon entering, she found an entire room at least 5 meters high, full of cabinets with tubes and various scrolls. In it, obviously, there wasn't just one scroll for each jutsu, but several, to protect and preserve the clan's treasure. She approached the earth-style ones and picked them up. She also found some wind-style jutsus and placed them into a storage scroll before leaving her clan and heading to the Hyuga clan, not far from there. Hanabi was already at the gate, waiting. After checking with her Byakugan that Suna was approaching, they had agreed to meet shortly after noon. "Here." Suna handed the scroll to Hanabi, who nodded. "Thank you," Hanabi replied. They soon said goodbye. Hanabi entered under the watchful eyes of the suspicious guards, but they couldn't do or say anything. They just returned to guarding the clan entrance and watched the Senju girl moving away as she leapt across the rooftops. Suna arrived at the hospital. "Wait. Are you saying you're leaving the hospital?" the head nurse murmured, surprised to see Suna, on a day off, knocking on her door and saying she was simply leaving the hospital. Being the greatest medical ninja after her mother, her knowledge was so vast that she was even more efficient. Due to Tsunade's inability to perform surgeries and deal with blood, Suna didn't have the same issue as her mother. "Exactly. I'm leaving the hospital because I want to train. A special training. I've been talking about this for over a month." "I hope you understand," Suna said with a serious tone. "I remember that," the woman commented, scratching her head. "I just didn't expect it to actually happen so soon." "Is there nothing we can do to make you stay?" she asked, knowing Suna's importance to the hospital. But the blonde girl shook her head. "There's nothing that would make me stay. I'm leaving," she said, confirming firmly, while the woman just sighed, seeing there was nothing she could do. "All right, you're going to be missed," she murmured. In the end, Suna left the place and returned to the clan. She trained her chakra control for the rest of the day, while at night she went to Kushina's house to eat with her and her uncle, to keep the Uzumaki girl company. Immediately, Kushina opened a shield in the place with her chains again. It was that same barrier. "Why are you going to Shikatsu Forest?" Nawaki murmured as they ate, and stopped when he heard that, looking surprised. "Yeah. I don't know how long I'll be there, but I'm already free from my duties," Suna replied. "All right," Nawaki nodded in the end. Despite worrying about his niece, he knew that a training like Sage Mode was dangerous.
He already knew about Minato, since he was the one who had suggested it to her.
You'll make it, Suna.
There's no doubt about that, Kushina said.
Suna gave a small smile. When do you plan to go? Nawaki asked.
Tomorrow, early in the morning, she replied.
I see. All right. Your mother would kill you if she knew about this. You know that, right? Nawaki said cautiously. Tsunade was very protective of her daughter, especially after losing Dan in the war.
I know that, but I'll have to commit myself, uncle. I'll make it worth it, she replied, building a certain confidence.
All right.
Just know that Katsuyu will probably snitch to Tsunade, maybe even ask her for permission for you to do the training, he warned. I'm well aware of that, but I'll have to go anyway. And if my mother tries to stop me, I'll talk to her, even if it's with my fists, she replied, while Nawaki sighed, believing it wouldn't end well, but also thankful he wouldn't be nearby when it happened.
In the end, they finished dinner, while Tsuna and Nawaki went to their residence, leaving Kushina at her house. Suna slept quite nervously that night, but woke up in the morning determined.
She left the house after packing a series of supplies in her backpack. Certainly, her absence would raise some questions in the village, but now she was no longer part of the hospital, so she could say she was in training, for now. She then summoned Katsuyu, who appeared in a small larva form.
Princess Suna, Katsuyu said with a feminine voice.
Katsuyu, I need to speak with your full body. Can you summon me to Shikatsu Forest? She asked.
You want to go to Shikatsu Forest?
Alright, she accepted the request without questioning much, then disappeared, and in the next moment, Suna also vanished in a puff of smoke. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.